This is Odessa, and we're in Odessa's backyard. Now, Odessa has a couple of reactivity problems with dogs behind the fence. We're not going to cover that in this, but if we do have a neighbor dog that comes out and she loses it, that's why. I've gone through a lot of tips that are going to help the guardians solve that problem. But in this video, we're going to go over some tips and tricks to help you have a successful and productive walk. Now, a lot of people are unaware that dogs have something called an opposition reflex. They are programmed to pull against the leash, or if you try to roll them over, they'll push against if they're lying on the ground. So because of that, the more you pull them on the leash, the more you're going to get this. And so you're really just, it's going to be uncomfortable for both of you. Now, I have got her fitted up with a martingale collar, and a little bit later on in the video, I'm going to show you a special trick, a special twist of leash that you can apply that will take the dog, give you a lot more control of the dog. However, this is using a tool to stop the dog from pulling, or that will be using a tool. My preference is to teach a dog to walk with a loose leash. I don't like to use leash corrections or any of the rest of that stuff. We will have to do that with the special twist, but it'll get the guardian started. All right, so the first thing I want to do is we're going to talk about lunging or pulling on the leash. Now, if the dog is pulling and I try to pull them back, again, it's just going to be a tug of war the whole time. So one of the first things I want to do is teach the dog to come back to me. And so the way I do that is as soon as the leash gets tense, I stop. And then I'm going to make a sound to get the dog to come back towards me. So I'm going to walk a little bit further away. All this, I'm just kidding. So as soon as she goes in front of me, of course she won't do it. So let's try this one more time. I'm going to have you call her once I turn around. Go ahead, call
Odessa!
her.
Odessa!
So when she gets to the end of the leash, we just want to call her back and then give her a treat. Now, we're in her backyard right now. It's outside, so there is some stimulus and distractions. If you have a dog that won't do this outside, practice it inside first. We definitely don't want to do that. So basically, the idea is if we do it with good timing, every time the leash gets tense, you make the kiss and you have treats in your hand. There you go, buddy. It's right there, you got it. And she turns around and comes back to you and you get the treat. Well, after a while, it becomes a conditioned response. I hit the end of the leash, I turn around and I go back to the human. Most of us, we try to pull the dog back in position. Like I said earlier, that's going to create more problems. Now, which side does she walk on, your right side or your left side?
Usually the right.
Okay, if I hear the word usually to start that, that means that's the wrong answer. Now, if you have a well-trained dog, your dog can walk on both sides. If your dog is not well-trained, I suggest that you pick a side for each dog. That way I can correct the dog independently and control the dog independently. If they're both on this side and I try to correct or control one of them, I'm doing it to the other one. I'm punishing the other one or whatever it is. So I would condition her, she always walks on the right or left, your preference, and he walks whatever side you want. But this way when we're walking, I know this is my place in the formation. So the very first thing you need to do is get the dog used to coming back to you. I would just do it in the yard. Now you can also, we have, one of her problems is when this neighbor over here has their dogs out, she wants to lunge over there. Now that's going to be too intense for her to do initially, but eventually what we could do, if she's way over there next to the fence, that dog is really proximate, it's going to be much more intense. Over here, it's going to be a lot easier for her to deal with. So once we practice this enough without the dog, then we could practice the coming back to the leash and walk maybe from the steps there to about here and walking back and forth. And when you walk this way, she's going to lunge that way. As soon as she does, you stop, make the kissing sound. She goes back to you. And you could even give it a fun command word like return or recall or attention or position or whatever you want to say. Again, try to come up with fun commands. And then she comes back to you. So we're conditioning her to move away from whatever she's going towards, number one, to come back to us, and we're also helping her develop some good leash manners. So we want to keep on doing that until she autonomously gets the end of the leash and turns and comes back to you. Now, I'm going to do it one more time, and in that time, I called her to come this way because I didn't know which direction she walks on. So if we're walking, if you can call him real quick.
Albus.
There we go. So,
Albus, come.
Go ahead, buddy. Go ahead. Yeah, that's not going to help motioning with the hand with the treat. So basically what I would do is when we're coming this way, go ahead and call her.
Odessa. Odessa.
I'm going to lure her back on this side, and you kind of block the camera, buddy. So let me show you one more time. So if we're going this way, when she gets in front, I'm going to lure her, and I'm doing a circle, and then putting her back in a sit, so she's facing the same direction. So for my dog, if I just go like this is the command to heel. My dog will run, and do a circle, and then come back and sit down facing this direction. So it's a nice kind of, it just makes it look a little bit more finished. So I would practice that, again, inside if you can't do it outside, then outside without those dogs here. Maybe when these dogs or these dogs are out, that's not as bad of a nemesis as that dog. But eventually we'd want to practice with that dog. And again, do not pull. And if you get to the point where she's just not coming back to you, go inside and practice again later on, or maybe practice on the other side of your hot tub or whatever it is. We want to increase the distance and keep on increasing the distance until she can perform the way we want. Once she does, then we're gradually going to collapse that distance, get her closer and closer to the fence, and ask her to come back to us. And we have the leash involved, so she can't get all the way there. But keep in mind, the closer you get to that fence, the more reactive and the harder it is going to be for her to react or to respond unless we've really programmed her properly. All right, so now we'll move a little bit closer so we can I can show you what I call my 5 rules for a structured walk. Now, I have her set it up with a martingale collar, which also is called a no-slip collar. Now, this is a 4-foot leash, not a 6-foot leash, which is a lot of people get, and then the dog is all over the place. For dogs, whoever's in front is perceived to be the leader. Return, or whatever the word is. But I mean, you just saw that was a great opportunity to practice the heck out of it. Okay, so the martingale, if you size it properly, the dog won't be able to pull it over its head. Can you call him again real quick?
Albus.
There you go. It's like, this is BS, man. Why am I not getting all the treats? So what I'm going to do, come here, sweetheart. Here, let me position your head down. Is I've got this loop here. That's okay. And so I'm going to position the loop on the spine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the leash and I'm going to run it around her chest, and I'm going through this loop towards her head. Never go towards her butt, always go towards her head. And then afterwards you can give her a treat and say whatever the command word is. Hey buddy, come over here. Just you, there you go. Now the nice thing is, I'm going to demonstrate here, if the dog gets out of control, and let's say it's not listening for this, you have a lot more control of the animal with this, and the strongest part of any animal is the chest. Now, I'm not saying to carry your dog around like that. That's an emergency situation. That should be very, very, very rare, if ever. But if you do get in a situation where the dog is aggressive or acting in a way that it's out of control, you have more control, and that gives you the ability to pick its front paws up and walk it away from whatever the stimulus is. Remember, if your dog has ever reacted to something, the best thing you can do is increase the distance between it and what it's reacting to, often around a corner or around something that's going to block its visual acuity. Okay, so now that we've got the dog set up on the martingale with this is what I refer to the special twist of the leash. Now, again, this is a 4-foot leash. If it's a 6-foot leash, I got to go way up here if I'm correcting before the leash gets taut. She can feel it. Now, I don't want to activate the opposition reflex. As you can see, now she's pulling. So what I'm going to do is if I'm walking, I'm going to pop it and relax it. I didn't need, whoop. But see how by popping it and taking the tension off before the opposition reflex or before she can respond to it, we can take that away. Instead of the pulling, we're not pulling the whole time. So rule number, now I have 5 rules for structured walk, but that's the correction, is a quick pop and immediately relax the leash. That means I'm bored, he's digging. All right, so I'm gonna walk around. I always do a circle where I keep the dog on the outside when I'm walking, and if she lags behind, I just kind of keep on going. Now again, I would prefer to entice her to want to come with me by using treats and a positive reinforcer. Sit. Now in this position, you see that her shoulder is aligned with my hip. That's the position she should be in when she's walking. If she gets too far in front and I try to pull up, see which direction, I'm actually pulling back, and I'm going to activate that opposition reflex. So when I'm pulling, I want to keep her in position. And so anytime she gets out of position, I'm going to do a quick pop up and down. And this is about how fast you want to do it. I mean, really, really fast. So the mistake people do when they're doing it is they go like this. And they hold it up here, and the dog's going to pull. All right, so rule number 1 of the 5 rules is to stay in your position. Her shoulder should be aligned with your hip. Rule number 2, this arm should be loosey-goose like a spaghetti noodle. If you're walking the dog, and the dog starts pulling and you start going like this, you're trying to pull her back in position. And again, you see, she's a strong dog, she's going to pull the whole time. So never pull back. If she gets out of position, just quick pop up and down. So rule number 2, keep your arm loose like a spaghetti noodle. Rule number 3 is, again, the pop. It's a quick jerk and then immediately relax it. And we don't want to pick her feet up off the ground unless it's an emergency situation. So it should be as little correction as possible. There's an old adage, don't use a hammer when a feather will suffice. We want to find as little correction as we need. All right, rule number 4 is no stopping and sniffing. And on these videos, I get a lot of people putting in comments on Facebook and upsetting me. You said the dog can't sniff, that's cruel. That would be cruel if that's what I'm saying, but that's not what I'm saying. Dog's nose controls 60% of their brain. If a dog is sniffing something and I hold up a T-bone steak, it cannot pay attention to me because its brain is overridden by its olfactory sensors. So what I want to do instead is when I'm walking, if the dog wants to stop and sniff, I let my arm go limp and I just keep walking. We're not going to stop, because if the dog stops to sniff something and I stop, then I'm letting the dog drive, and it's in their leadership position. Rule number 5, and I'm going to come back to this. So the dog can sniff as much as it wants, but if it stops to sniff, I'm just letting my arm go limp and I keep going, and the rig will keep her coming with me. Rule number 5 is no marking. Now, she's a female, but some female dogs will mark. The more that a dog marks, that's a leadership quality, that's claiming territory, and anything away in between the furthest point away that your dog marks in your home, in your dog's mind, is its territory. And that will make them often more reactive. So we don't want to allow the dog to mark. I let the dog pee before the walk, at the end of the walk. Most of us are not taking 4-hour walks. So the dog can hold it for a couple hours if necessary. But if we let them mark on everything that they pass, they're kind of asserting themselves, and then they're in the leadership position, not us. All right, now I was talking about the sniffing. Now, to say the dog can't sniff would be cruel. We're saying you can sniff, you just can't, I'm not going to stop and let you sniff. But that's not the funnest walk for the dog. So now you can use this for running. One of the guardians actually runs with the dog, and this works just fine for running too. Now, one last little tip on this. Sometimes this will drift back here. Make sure it's in the armpits. So it's not, there you go. That's the position we want right there. And if you do find that your dog is losing fur right here, you can get like a tube sock, cut the end off, and run it through and make it like a sleeve, and it'll protect your dog. She's a shorter hair breed. These are the dogs that typically do start losing a little fur there, so you might need to use that. Now, because now sniffing is a very stimulating thing for dogs. It's enjoyable for them, and it's draining. So we want them to sniff, but if they're sniffing, they're not going to be listening to us on the walk. So how do we solve this problem? There we go. He's digging again. So how do we solve this problem? Well, what I adopt is what I call an off again, on again strategy. So maybe I go for a quarter of the walk in a structured manner where the dog's walking next to me at a heel. Then, and in this right position. Then for the next quarter of the walk, I undo the martingale, or I let the dog sniff and move around a little, have a little bit more freedom. Then I go back to the third quarter of the walk, back to structured, and the last quarter free. Now, when I typically do this, usually when I first start doing it, I do a couple, like maybe a week's worth of walks, where it's just a structured walk. They're walking the whole time, no stopping and sniffing. Then after they start getting the hang of it, then I start letting them sniff at the last quarter of the walk and fart around and have some fun on that last quarter. And then after a while, I go to on again, like 4 quarters for the walk. Whatever works is going to work better for you. But the idea is we want it to be a fun activity for us, but we also don't want to be too regimented, or, you know, we enjoy it when the dog walks at heel, but if it's too regimented, that's not very fun for them. And if it's there all over the place, it's not very fun for us. So we have to kind of find a happy medium. And like I said, one of the best things to do is teach your dog to walk with a loose leash. Sit. Now, one last little thing that I do is something I call the long walk. I'm going to demonstrate it a little bit here. I'm just going to walk kind of in a loop. Well, I'm going to show a couple things, actually. The first thing I'm going to show you is a U-turn. So let's say that there's a sidewalk going from here to there. We're on the sidewalk. And let's say that she's reactive to other dogs. So if we see another dog before she sees it, we could actually get her out of trouble before she reacts if we practice a U-turn. So what we're going to do is I'm going to imagine there's a sidewalk going between me and the camera. So as I'm walking down the street, I see another dog. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn sideways. So the sidewalk's going this way, I'm halfway this, and then I'm going to hold the treat here. You saw that guy didn't come. I don't give her the treat yet. I take one more step, and then I put it in her mouth and I say the word turn. Then I walk a couple steps this way. Turn. So what I'm doing is I'm walking this way, doing a turn. 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 So you're basically doing a little oval. I find I have to take about 8 steps, otherwise I start getting dizzy. But the idea is you want to do this when there are no other dogs or people around. So the dog practices, like for some reason, blue shirt guy comes, and now my humans sometimes do a little donut for no reason. Don't need to. Well, if we only turn when we see a dog or something a dog's reacted to, then we turn and they're looking around to see what's behind them. So we just practice this on a walk. So for about a week, maybe a week to 2 weeks, every block do 2 sets of U-turns. One, and then do a second one, and then go back the same direction you're going. So this way the dog just is like, they just do this every once in a while and just roll with it. And now we have a turn, if we say it enough, you see, even though she's really strong wants to go, I have more control. So eventually we just say turn, and the dog will turn expecting to get that treat. Okay, so that's basically the U-turn. The last thing I want to do, I know, sweetheart, this is a longer video. We're almost done and we can go back to playing. So as we're walking, I want to build in practices at stopping and sit. Sit, that was a good one. But I would like the dog face in the same direction next to me. So as we're walking, sit. And I'm trying not to pull her on the leash. I'm trying to use the treat to get her in the position I want. Sit. Sit. That takes up to 5 steps. Stop. Sit. Sit. That was 3 treats. By the third one, she automatically went on her stopped on her own and sat down. I'll let you go back to playing. Go ahead, sweetheart. So basically, what I do, I call this a long walk. So when I'm walking down the street, I never take more than 5 steps before I ask the dog to sit somewhere. Sometimes I take 1 step, sometimes it's 2.